Hey guys, it's Danielle here from the Earth Mumma. I'm doing something a little bit different today. I've got Ashley from the Motherhood Circle. Ashley is a friend of mine from back when we had our first babies, December 2016, and also a fellow business mama. So I'm going to introduce you guys to her so she can have a bit of a chat to us about being the mother that you want to be. She's got some great experience and knowledge in this area, as well as two of her own kids. So she comes from a personal and professional perspective. So go for it, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Danny. I'm Ashley, and as Danielle said, we met a couple of years ago when I was pregnant with my second baby, and I was on this journey of having this VBAC, and so I was kind of really aligned to the women who were educated, informed, and who wanted to have a similar birth to me. And so we were kind of in a group of 200 or 300 women, and Danielle and a bunch of us were really aligned to each other, and I felt an instant connection, and we've just kept that relationship going, which has been really beautiful and really nice. And we're across the country from each other. And through my experience of the VBAC journey and the experiences that I had as a mother of two in my postpartum, I experienced some birth trauma with this birth of my second baby. And I was really wanting to let women know about my experiences, because I didn't want anyone to go through the experience that I had gone through. I didn't want them to feel isolated. I didn't want them to feel lonely. I didn't want them to have to go through some of the abuse that I went through, some of the bullying, I suppose, through my pregnancy, to have this VBAC. And it was a really traumatizing time for me through the pregnancy. It was anxiety ridden, and it was supposed to be like this exciting, empowering journey. I was informed, I was educated, I was excited, and I just wasn't being received that way. So I then went on to start a blog, and I felt like that wasn't enough. I wanted to do more. I wanted to educate women more. So I started doula from Newborn Mothers, and I became a postpartum doula, supporting women in their homes with practical support. But then I have expanded even further, and now I found my zone of genius is in teaching and sharing and holding space and a safe space for women to find themselves in motherhood, to grow their confidence, to find their calm, confidence and connection, and be the best mother they can be. And I believe that we can be the mother that we want to be, and that's pretty much been my mission since I first became a mother. Is you get so many opinions and so much judgment and so many views and so many ideas on what motherhood should be and who you should be as a person, that I kind of just felt so restricted. I just wanted to break free of that and just be the mother that I wanted to be, which comes with pushing against the norm or pushing against people. And it's been a big journey for me. But I've had life coaches, I've done professional development, I've been surrounded by empowering, powerful, strong women. And now I'm here to teach other women how they can be the mother they want to be. So I'm going to run a bit of a, I guess, like a mini workshop. I do free workshops each month. There's a different topic. So I'm going to pick a couple of points I'm going to be talking about today, so that if you are feeling exactly the same as me and you want to be the mother you want to be, whether you're pregnant or you're currently a mother, you can implement some of these steps and understand why it's important to start with these steps as well.
Thanks so much, Ashley. And I know from personal experience with my first boy, Lucas, I felt so much pressure, so much judgment, so many opinions from everybody about how I should do everything. And I just didn't know how to filter through that. I had no idea what I was doing. I was stressed out because people were saying, you need to record this, you need to let him cry it out, you need to, don't let him sleep in the bed, you know, top him up with formula, all these opinions. And none of them really were what worked for me. So I just ended up feeling stressed. Sorry about the baby.
Oh, no probs.
Don't see him.
This is the motherhood channel, isn't it?
Exactly. So yeah, but I mean, first-hand experience, just being friends with you. You've been such a huge support for me throughout that time, and I know how much support you've given other mums as well. Hey.
It's been a pleasure to be part of your journey, and it always lights me up whenever you message me, especially when you were, telling me about your plans for your latest birth. I was just so excited for you and loved following your journey and hearing about, then you wanted to start this beautiful business. And so now I follow your business and I'm so inspired. I let other mothers know about your beautiful business because, it's so nice when we align and connect with other people who share similar values and want the same things in life as us. So it's been a powerful journey.
It really is. And the second time around, I really just went with my gut, which is what led me into having a home birth and really trusting in my instincts and my body and what it was capable of doing. So, and it turned out to be the most perfect experience. I just couldn't have done it better. And I hope every other mum can experience that at some point in their lives as well, no matter if they've had a traumatic birth previously.
Yeah, that's all I hope for women to have as well, for them to know their choices and then to become their own advocate and then to do, follow their own path and, live their own journey, not somebody else's journey, basically, isn't it?
Absolutely. So Ashley, I would love to hear about why we need to be, I guess, empowered and informed about our decisions in parenthood.
This is probably I was talking to somebody on a mother's group about this the other day. I said, I was talking about it's really hard to communicate through text, but one of the most important things I found through my own journey is, first of all, it's not enough to be empowered and informed yourself. There are other steps which I'm going to talk to you about that are really important for you to embody and understand. But one of the most important things is, first of all, before you discover or even know what you're going to do, you need to know all of the choices that are available to you. What happens, unfortunately, is that when we're pregnant, we go to the GP and the GP says, oh, great, okay, let's do this test, let's do this test, let's do that test, let's make sure, let's do this scan. And this is where you're going to be birthing. This is your local hospital. You're going to be in this catchment. Unless you've got private health and you have already decided you're going to go with an OBGYN or a private midwife, which is, very, very select, small portion of the group going with a private midwife first off the bat. But basically for me, my experience was I basically was told, this is your local catchment, this is your local hospital, this is where you're going. So I say, okay, great, cool, no problems, it's right near me, 10 minutes away, whatever, I'll be going there. I'm just glad that it's free. I'm happy that I'm going to be going to the hospital and seeing the experts on birth. And unfortunately, many women don't know their choices. I mean, this is just one of the first choices that women are making, besides the testing. So there's choices to know about testing, the pros and cons of having scans, the pros and cons of having blood tests, knowing what tests are available for you, knowing what ultrasounds are available for you, knowing the cost of the ultrasounds, knowing the purpose of having them, and also understanding the dangers with some of these tests as well. So there's pros and cons of each option available to you, and then knowing how regularly you have them. What's the common practice in Australia? Can you decline them? Can you consent to them? Is this a consensual thing? So knowing the rights as well. So that's just testing and ultrasounds. And then the next thing, I suppose, is then finding a supportive provider. Once you've, I think finding a supportive provider and also finding a birthplace come hand in hand, because you need to understand, where you'll be birthing and what sort of birth you want, understanding what sort of birth you want. Do you want a vaginal, natural birth, an undisturbed birth, or do you want to have a medicalized birth in a hospital setting, is usually where you would have a medicalized birth. There's so many different birthing options out there. And then from knowing your choices and knowing what kind of birth you want, you can then go on to advocate for yourself. A lot of women, especially women who are wanting to have a natural birth, or even if you want to have a cesarean birth, there are so many options available to you in a cesarean birth that you may not be knowing until once you've had your baby and you have your baby and you like talk to another woman who's had a cesarean birth or a natural birth, and you think, oh, I didn't know that option was available to me and nobody told me about that option. Unfortunately, what the process should be is what I think is that there's a missing link in the system where you should kind of go see someone like myself, I suppose, who is going to sit down with you, kind of like a counselor. You know how you have those guidance counselors at school? So I call myself a motherhood guide, and I'm a trained postpartum doula as well. But basically like someone who's going to guide you. So like, okay, you're trying to conceive a baby. This is a map of where you can go. These are the pros and cons. How do you intuitively feel? What are your stories that are holding, you know, your fear stories or your stories from your mother's birth or your friend's birth that are holding you back and stopping you from making the right choices for you? And then where can we go from here? Where can we map it out, kind of? That's what's missing in our system, unfortunately, which is what I'm hoping to gap and making more mainstream and readily available for women. That's what I would want to see in, you know, in every area for women to kind of get educated. Now, there's plenty of information on the internet, of course, but as you'll find when you're going on Google, there's conflicting information. It's biased information based on who wrote the article. You may find that if you're researching a home birth, you may find that, you know, oh, an obstetrician has written the article, so it's going to be biased against a home birth. When we're reading articles online, we don't know who the source is, you know, where it's coming from, who the source is coming from, what are their bias, what are their experiences, are they writing a piece, an informational piece that's just, you know, this is the information and these are the things you should look for, or are they writing it from a marketing perspective that they run a business and they're trying to get you to, you know, go in to purchase their service? Is it the government that's writing the article? So that's a thing you need to look out for when you're looking at information online as well. But I suppose that's pretty much all there is with choices. As you go on through your pregnancy and your birth, there are hundreds of choices that you will need to make, but they won't always be presented to you as a choice. They will often, and the language is important, they will often be presented to you as this is what's going to happen. And so language is really important when you're birthing, especially in your pregnancy. I found myself that often I was told by the doctor, now when we get to 38 weeks, we're going to be looking at inducing you. You're going to have an induction. That is what's going to happen. And so I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to meet my baby 2 weeks early. That's really cool. I was like telling all my friends, I'm going to be induced. You know, I talked to a lady, you know, you go in this group, and I was talking to this lady and she said, yeah, I had an induction with my baby and my baby came out, just like popped right out within a couple of hours. And I was like, oh, cool. You know, like I'm going to go in. My mum had a quick labor. I'm going to go in and have this labor. It's going to be cool. And the baby's going to pop out and it's going to be fine. And I found myself, because I had gestational diabetes and a higher BMI woman, that I was lumped in with obstetricians in the public system. And I thought, this is really cool. Like, I've got the best of the best. I'm seeing like obstetricians. I don't have to pay for it. Yes, I feel like the treatment's a little bit cold. I'm not really getting answers to the questions I'm asking. Like, I kept asking questions like, you know, what are the birth options, or what do I do? What do I need to plan for birth? What do I need to prepare for birth? And every week they kind of said to me, you know, we'll get round to that later on, and next week we'll talk about that, or we'll get onto that. And I was like, okay. And I didn't really, it was very clinical and very cold. And so it was just like a matter of testing, you know, making sure my blood pressure was okay, and everything was perfect. Everything always came back fine, and I was doing everything that I was told to. As a good girl that I'm a people pleaser, so I wanted to make sure I was being a good girl and I wasn't putting on any weight, and, you know, I was just being a good girl. But I didn't understand that there were biases against me as being a overweight woman. I knew that there was an increased risk of me having a cesarean, but I didn't actually understand why. And when I said this to the OB, I said, look, I know that I'm at higher risk of a cesarean, but the last thing I want is a cesarean. Like, I'm frightened of it. I don't want to do it. It's not something I ever want to do. My mum and everyone in my family has had vaginal natural births, and this is what I want to do. And she just kind of looked at me, was like, yeah, you know. And I said, I don't have a birth plan because, you know, I just want to like go with the flow. And she was like, yeah, that's the best thing to do. Just go with the flow. And that's good. That's good, you know. And I was like, okay, everything's fine. You know, I'm just going to do what they tell me to do. And so I followed the plan. I did everything that I was told to do. And then I ended up having this induction and it failed. And I was like, what? So I think I was in this process for 2 days, getting these gels, getting this, getting that, getting this balloon thing overnight that was the most excruciating pain of my life. I thought, God, if I can't handle this, how am I going to handle labor? Like, this was painful. And they made me feel really like a sook because I needed gas and air for this balloon thing they put in my cervix. But nobody had actually sat down and talked to me about the process and the procedure. Nobody had talked to me about the risks. Nobody had talked to me about it even being a choice. And nobody had told me that, you know, there's a very high chance of it failing for a first-time mum. I had not been included in the journey and the process. I had not been, you know, talked to as an educated woman that could, you know, have a conversation and understand these things. And I wasn't given any choice or information. I was just told what I was going to do and I accepted it. Which did lead me to a cesarean, which is what I didn't want. Of course, I wanted a healthy baby, but what I didn't understand is that I could advocate for myself and I could, you know, educate myself and I could have found all these resources. I didn't understand the complexities of interventions and the pros and cons of things, and I couldn't make an informed choice. Which is why now I, you know, talk about making an informed choice and why it's really important for women to understand the process and the pros and cons of these things that are being recommended and, you know, are often steering women off the path that they truly want to be down. So that's pretty much step number one for being informed and empowered by knowing your choices. By being informed about your choices, you can then empower yourself to make the right choices for you, and then take that responsibility on.
You're so right, and I actually was offered an induction with my first boy as well, purely because I was in pain, and I had no idea of the risks. I just thought, yay, I'm going to meet my baby early. I'm so desperate to meet him. I was so excited. Thankfully, that didn't eventuate, and I didn't know any better, but I did have an instrumental birth, and I felt really ripped off by that, and I feel the hospital setting is probably what made that happen, and that's why I chose home birth the second time around, knowing that I didn't want all these interventions, and I felt I could advocate for myself while I was at home, with midwives that were willing to take my lead, which was really lovely.
It's a very common story to hear that of a first-time mum who then goes on as a second or even a third-time mum to kind of go down a different path once she knows a bit more, once she's had that experience. It's just a sad thing that women have to go through that to begin with. And so you have a choice. Once you've gone down there, you either find out that you feel like you've been ripped off, or you feel like you don't want that experience again, or you kind of go down the path never knowing or blocking it out or not listening to, you know, these messages around you where women are sharing their stories and saying, I got ripped off, you know, this traumatic birth was because of this. And then that's where you see where the mummy wars kind of go on. Have you seen them on Facebook and in mums groups where people are defending people are being triggered by their, you know, they want to defend that this didn't happen to them. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated and where women are divided, which is, you know, another thing that I don't have in my community. It's a safe space for everyone, no matter what happened, what you chose. It doesn't matter. There is no right or wrong. But I also provide that education and information so women can make those informed choices for themselves, or explore what happened in their birth afterwards, so they can go on to make different choices for their next birth as well. And I suppose leading on to step 2 is why you must advocate for yourself, because when you know the information, that's the next step, is for you to advocate for yourself. And so you then have to, put on your, your best suit, turn up to your birthing. I mean, depending on where you're choosing to birth, you then advocate for yourself. You know the information, you're then speaking up for yourself, and you're, saying, this is the path that I want to go down. Informed decision making and informed consent, which is what a lot of people talk about in hospital settings. It's supposed to be, in Australia wide, it's supposed to be informed consent. And I was reading a brochure recently. Informed consent is actually a mixture of the woman's choices with, evidence-based information, based with a conversation with the healthcare provider. That's what informed consent is. So you have basically decided from the research you've done, or whatever, you don't even have to research, but based on what you intuitively feel is right for you, you then have a conversation with your healthcare provider and letting them know what your choices are. You're then supposed to have some sort of lovely, respectful conversation with that healthcare provider. And then from that point on, the decision's been made. You've advised them, this is what you're going to be doing. Whether you go with, what they've offered up for you, or whether you're continuing with your original plan, or you both come together in a respectful way, and that's, what happens. But unfortunately, what happens in the settings, especially in hospital settings, and everyone has a different experience based on their personality, where they're birthing, what hospital, who they're seeing, what mood that person's in at the time as well. There's so many different variations. I mean, when you go to your doctor, you can get different kinds of moods. I mean, everyone has a different mood as well. And also, what experience did they have in that particular time? Did they just attend a birth that was actually quite traumatic? Are they carrying that experience around with them? Have they just got in trouble from their boss for doing something that was labeled as risky? So now they're not doing that anymore. For example, breech birth. I know a doctor who was delivering breech births, and then she was like one of the only doctors around, and then she had some sort of poor outcome with that. So then all of a sudden she was demoted, and then she's no longer as open-minded as she was, because she's lost her job, and she's been demoted, so that's her livelihood, that's her. Whether she did something wrong or right is not relevant in this situation. What's relevant is the fact that she was doing something that wasn't mainstream, even though evidence-based suggests that breech delivery vaginally versus cesarean is pretty much the same risk. I could go on and on and on about breech, but also knowing how, policies and procedures are formed. They're formed off of evidence-based information that has been, evidence-based information. Everyone goes to evidence-based information as king and studies. I don't really like evidence-based studies and research. And I'll tell you why, because I went to a doula conference last year or the year before, and Rachel Reed was actually talking, and she just recently released a book called Induction Matters. She is a researcher, and she's a midwife, but she's a researcher. She spends all her 80% of her job researching articles, reading articles, doing studies, and she works in a team with people when she does a study. Now, studies are usually done because they're paid for by a company, and that company is paying for an outcome. They're paying a lot of money for a study to be done. It takes a lot of money for these sorts of things to happen. Usually it'll be a big pharma company who's come along, like Johnson & Johnson or someone like that, who wants their product to have some evidence and some study behind them to show doctors that this is a great thing. Now, they'll ask for a certain outcome, and when they go through and do the study, the people that they have on the study panel will have their own personal experiences, their own opinions, their own views, and there will always be an obstetrician that is overseeing this and usually leading this panel. And that obstetrician will have minimal research experience, whereas someone like Dr. Rachel Reed is doing this as a full-time job, but she's not taking the lead on this because this is the way that it kind of goes out. So this person who has minimal experience is then taking the lead, and they've been told that they want to research some outcomes. Now, when they do the studies, they do this study trying to get these outcomes, and then it gets reported. And even if they come across information that conflicts with that information or that study that they're trying to get the outcome from, they will not include that in the study because they're not being paid to find that outcome or that information. So that information will just get dropped and never see the light of day. And then they'll go get it published by this big publishing place that, that publishes the journals, the medical journals, and then it'll get released. And then everyone Australia-wide will get this study, and the policies and procedures will change based on that one study that had, this outcome. And so this is exactly what happened with breech birth babies. There was a study that said, if you deliver a breech birth baby vaginally, there are a higher chance of having poor outcomes. And what happened was Australia-wide, all of a sudden, nobody was doing breech birthing anymore. It was just like, that's it, we're not doing it anymore. There has been new studies that have come out that actually prove that it's just as safe to vaginally breech birth your baby as the cesarean. The risks overall are generally the same. And unfortunately, nobody's trained in vaginally delivering breech birth babies anymore. So it takes a long time once that happens to then come back, even though the evidence out there saying, it takes a while to come back to doing that. We were delivering breech vaginal babies, back in the day all the time. Everyone knew how to do it. Everyone was doing it. This is just a little bit of tidbit information that I came across that I wanted to share because I think Dr. Rachel Reed has said yes, that she will be interviewed on my motherhood video series, and I'm so excited to have her on because I want to pick her brains and share, get my audience to hear her knowledge. But when you hear these conversations and you hear these people who are working behind the scenes and you hear what they're saying, it just blows your mind at what's going on. I have a midwife friend who was working at a local hospital who said to me that, this obstetrician was running around bragging about his high cesarean rates. I've got a 99, not a 90, it was a 90% cesarean rate. And I was just proud of that because you're talking about a surgeon. This person has studied to become a surgeon. That is their main purpose of their job. It's not delivering vaginal birth babies, natural, normal birth. Their job is to be a surgeon, So that person has that mindset. They're working in a public hospital. When they're on shift, they're thinking, I just want to do surgery. This is what I'm great at. This is what I do. I want to keep my quotas up. I want to keep my numbers up. I want to keep my percentages up. I want to be known as the doctor who does the most surgeries, There's all these other things that impact how a woman's birth ends up. And it's as much as, for me, in my experience with my second baby, when I advocated for myself and I pushed my VBAC, it was a matter of the obstetrician on the day had judged me as a fat woman. This is what I've been told from another obstetrician. The bias that was put on me as she saw me as an obese woman, her mind said, she's not going to be able to do it. She's not going to be able to endure this. Fat women can't birth. There are lower rates of fat women or bigger women having vaginal births. But that is because doctors have this, or people have this bias against bigger women. And they're saying to them, okay, well, look, she came into the birthing suite. I was birthing perfectly well, laboring perfectly. My body was amazing. She came into the room. I'd never met this woman before. And she said to me, oh, C-section. And I said to her, why are you coming into my room talking to me about C-section, lady? Do not talk about it. And I do not to this day know why she even mentioned it, but it was a trigger for me because I'd fought my entire pregnancy to fight against this C-section. I was totally triggered. And as you know, when you're in labor, the last thing you want is people around you who are negative or bringing in things that are spiking adrenaline into your birthing space. So with the advocating is really, really, really important. especially in your birth. You need to be the strongest advocate for yourself, but it is still not enough, you know, being informed, knowing all this information, advocating for yourself. It's still not enough, especially in the birthing situation. In the motherhood situation, it probably is enough for you to know your choices, especially around breastfeeding, and to know who to turn to. It probably is enough for you. But especially in the birthing situation, it's probably not enough for you.
I think it's really important as a first-time mother as well to have that external person, such as a doula or a support person who is really fully on board with your wishes. Because when you are in the moment of labour, and especially my first experience, I felt completely out of control. I was completely within myself. I had no idea what was happening. I would have consented, or I wouldn't call it informed consent, but I would have just agreed to anything in that moment without having someone around me to say, hey, no, she doesn't want that. So it's really important. And I had the experience of being a bigger woman with my first baby as well, where they sent me to a high-risk obstetrician to be reviewed. And I was absolutely freaking out because straight away I thought they're going to suggest that I have a cesarean. I know it, you know, this is what I thought they were going to suggest for me. I got there, and the woman thankfully was really lovely, and she said, look, I have no need to see you. We don't, you know, I'm not concerned at all. But I just felt that immense pressure of, wow, can I actually do this because I'm a bigger girl, you know? And of course I could do it. And
you did it beautifully, didn't you?
yeah, and the second time around, you know, I barely even saw an obstetrician, and still everything went perfectly well. So
yeah.
You know, there's power in knowledge.
I'm just noticing Levi sleeping. Oh my goodness, he's so gorgeous.
Finally.
Is it a bit peaceful? You're like, yes.
Oh, it's lovely.
I am relaxed now. Oh, God, he's so cute. Makes me want to have another one. Oh. I guess the next step that I'm going to talk to you about today and is understanding your core values and living your life to alignment. And the reason why I like to talk about living your life to core values and your alignment, that I suppose the journey of being the mother you want to be starts from conception or even before you have your baby, and it carries through your pregnancy, and the kind of birth that you have and the way you feel after your birth, whether you feel empowered, powerful or disempowered, really brings on, you know, your motherhood journey. It's a start of your motherhood journey, whether you want to feel powerful and strong or experience like I felt, which was, especially with my first one, I felt like a biggest failure of having this cesarean. I felt like a failure. And it didn't help that one of my girlfriends had said to me, who I don't really speak to anymore, I'm not really sure why. No, I do know why. She was a bit toxic. It's because she said to me, you know, you didn't fight enough. You just gave up. You just gave in. And here's me totally a bit traumatized, feeling down on myself. I had this one friend say to me, you know, you've given up, you didn't, you know, I would never have cesarean. Well, that's great for you to come from a place of having vaginal births, of being fortunate to have that opportunity and have that happen. And I was feeling like a failure. So I spent probably about 6 to 12 months feeling like I didn't birth my baby. I felt like because I didn't feel connected in the birthing situation, I was drugged out and I didn't feel connected. And many cesarean women feel that way. They don't feel like they birthed their baby. They feel like a failure, embarrassed to talk to other people about it. I know there's a lot of support around cesarean birth now. There's a lot of advocacy and things like that, which is really great. But it didn't matter what anyone said to me. If they, you know, people would comfort me and, you know, I would say, oh, yeah, let's not talk about it. You know, I didn't even say the birth of my baby. It was just a horrible, now I can, you know, now that I am in my journey, I can say that, you know, I birthed my baby, but I still don't feel as if I birthed my baby like I would have if I had vaginally birthed my baby. And that's just because biologically, I believe that, you know, there's a biological need there for me to feel that way. I talk to other women who have had cesarean sections and they don't feel the same way as me. And that's perfectly fine. We all have our own experiences and journeys and our own desires and wants and needs. but I know there's a lot of women out there who experience the same. So that then went on with my breastfeeding journey, you know, because then I wasn't feeling powerful. I had spent my entire pregnancy putting my power onto other people, allowing other people to make decisions for me. And so, you know, I'm trying to be the mother I want to be. I'm trying to be a good mom and try to, you know, learn how to be a mother, learn how to breastfeed, and heal from the cesarean. And I got myself home, and I was sort of knowing how to breastfeed my baby, but I still didn't really know, because when you have your baby, they grab your boob and grab the baby and put the baby on there. So you're not really learning how to breastfeed. And I went home and we had this awful night and we didn't know how to breastfeed, and my nipples were bloody and red and I knew she was starving. And I was about to go to a health clinic, but it was about 20 minutes away from my home. But I also knew that somebody was coming in this 4-hour period. Don't you just hate that when it's like they don't tell you when they're coming, they give you like a 4-hour period? So we gathered our stuff and we were about to head out the door, and she had arrived. And I'd never met this person before in my life. She was a midwife. She came to my door and she was in a frantic, I don't know how many appointments she had had, or if she was running behind. This is the other thing. Someone's coming in with their energy into your home. You've never met them before. They're a complete stranger. She had the personality of like a worried, nervous kind of person. And you know, she checked the baby and the baby had lost 10% of weight. She knew she was starving or hungry, you know, she wasn't dying. And so she was like, okay, bottles, let's get bottles, let's boil them. Husband, go out, get some formula. I'm freaking out, like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, my milk hasn't come in. I don't even know what's happening. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. You know, if you say, this is what I have to do, this is what I do. I'm going to be the best mom I can be. This is what I do. You know, I just do what I'm told. So we gave her a bottle of formula. The lady was like, okay, cool, you know, just keep giving her formula. And then she left. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't want to feed my baby formula. It stinks. Like, I never wanted to do this. My mum breastfed me. This is what I want to do. And then my milk came in that night, but I still didn't know how to breastfeed. So I sent my husband out to go get an expressor. So then I was pumping my milk and then bottle feeding her. And then by 4 months, by 6 weeks, I was exclusively bottle feeding her my breast milk. But there was a lot of shame that came with that because I wasn't breastfeeding her. And so when I was out in public, I was like, you know, I wanted to have this sticker on my bottles that was said like, this is breast milk, this is not formula, because there was a lot of shame with formula feeding. It wasn't from outside. Again, this was internal. This is my own shame, because I knew that the people in my family probably were judging me. My family was probably judging me because my family is not very supportive. And so those stories were then coming into my mindset. And then by 4 months, you know, we were mixed feeding by, you know, basically 10 weeks. And by 4 months, my milk supply was really low. I had gone to a health nurse and a GP for help. There was no help, no support. They basically told me just to feed my baby food and just formula feed. And by 6 months, I was totally depressed and felt like an even bigger failure because I had failed at everything I'd tried to do. And I looked at my beautiful baby and I couldn't help but thinking, oh my God, I'm a failure. And so when my second baby came, I was on this journey like, no, I'm having this vaginal VBAC. I'm doing all the things right. I'm waiting the period of time they recommend. And I went through that journey, and I advocated for myself, and, you know, I did all these things. But what I needed to learn was that I needed to learn how to advocate for myself, but I also needed to learn that this was my journey. I did not need permission from anybody else to tell me what I could or couldn't do with myself, my body, or my baby. I needed to, for me, at that point in time in my journey, I needed to have the evidence-based information because I didn't know the extra information about evidence-based information. And I still needed to be ticking the boxes and doing all the things that were deemed as good. And I didn't get the birth that I wanted, as I mentioned. Unfortunately, on the day that I didn't have a supportive team around me. I also got kicked out of hospital at 37 weeks from my local hospital because Ashley was now not a good girl anymore. I was this naughty girl who was not doing growth scans, and I was not consenting to induction, and I was not consenting to a cesarean. And we found out about 25 weeks that it wasn't anything outside of my baby being in danger or me being in danger. It was purely a staffing issue at that hospital. They said, look, we're not really comfortable if you do come into labour and you do need an emergency, which, by the way, is a very rare chance of that happening. But if in the chance that it happens, we will only have junior obstetricians on board. And I said to them at that point in time, that's okay. Let's what you can do is send me to a hospital that will have senior obstetricians. So if in the rare chance there is an emergency, they'll be fine and capable and confident dealing with that. So then I don't have to be induced and all this other stuff that you want me to do that I know is going to increase my chance at another cesarean. And they just kind of looked at me and were like, yeah, okay, like whatever, ignored me. And then by 37 weeks, when they couldn't fearmonger me or bully me into what they wanted me to do, they had caused me anxiety. I was crying to my appointments. I didn't want to go. I was fighting with them, like how I felt, like being strong enough while you're pregnant to advocate for yourself and have these conversations over and over and over again. Was really demoralizing. And, in the conversations, they made me feel like I couldn't birth my baby vaginally because I was a bigger woman. So anything they could do, they were doing to try to take away my confidence in my choices. They were not supportive. It was not informed consent. It was bullying. And by 37 weeks, they called me up and said, nothing had changed in my journey or anything. Nothing had changed from my choices. But they said, look, we've decided you're too high risk. We're not willing to take you on. We're going to recommend that you go to a different hospital, or you have to birth at a different hospital. So at 37 weeks, I was like gobsmacked. I was already traumatized. And I then had to decide which hospital I was going to go to from that point on. Which doesn't leave you from a position of power, which is why when I say know your choices in conception, before you've actually tried for your baby, you can then make a choice in a powerful position and choose someone who aligns with your values and your core beliefs and that sort of thing. By knowing your values, because we're supposed to be talking about values here, by knowing your values and what you want in your life, you can then pick the right space to birth in, the right care providers, because for me, those people that I was speaking to and seeing, they had totally different values to me. So we were constantly in conflict. They didn't believe the same things as me. I was talking to people who, I'm very holistic now. I believe in natural birth. I believe in, everything natural. Doesn't mean that I disagree with anyone making those choices. It just means that now when I'm looking for, someone to support me, I'm looking for a holistic person, someone who believes in birth, someone who believes in breastfeeding, everything that's natural, which is why I get along with you so well, Danielle, because, here you are with this natural, eco-friendly business. So these are my people, and these are the people that I'm surrounded by, and this is who I'm getting my encouragement from. We've got similar mindsets and similar values and that sort of thing. So by living your life to your value, you then are following, everything in your life, and you're building yourself up with people who are supportive and understanding of you and feel the same way as you, and uplift you, empower you. Then you become this powerful, strong woman who can then stand up strong, confidently, not wavered. You will be wavered in some of your choices, but easily able to snap out of it and go, no, this is what I want to do. When the next person who comes around you with toxic energy, or with a different opinion to yours, or, says you're making a rod for your own back, which often happens in motherhood, it's your fault your baby's not sleeping. It's your fault this, you're constantly hearing the judgments. Oh, I didn't do that. I did this. You can easily recover from that and say, that's okay. This is what aligns to my parenting style and me as a mother. I want to cuddle my baby. I don't want to leave my baby to cry. Or, you know, actually, I'm going to leave my baby to cry because I know my personality and I know I can't cope. Whatever it is that suits you as a person, you then can, you know, back yourself up. And the more you practice that, the better you'll become at being able to do that. And of course, you know, once you've had your first baby, you know, by the time you have your second, your confidence is so much more stronger. And there, as you know yourself, because you've been through that process yourself. But what I'm trying to achieve is that we get that right with the first pregnancy, with the first baby. And I've seen it with some of the women in my programs who are first-time mothers, who are advocating for themselves, who are informed, who know what they want, who are able to make choices. And it doesn't mean that this is a rigid path, because things change, right? Our health changes, or our baby's health changes. We're adaptable and we're able to change, but we're able to make the right choices at the right time to see us in the right place where we want to go.
It's so true. And I really wish I had that knowledge back when I had my first son. I feel strongly things would have been different. You know, overall, I was grateful to have a happy, healthy baby, and I was healthy myself, but I wished it was different at the same time. So, you know, I really wish that I had have had that knowledge, and I definitely upped the ante with the second one and decided to go all in and find out everything and anything I could. And it paid off. It really, really paid off for me. So I was grateful for that.
It's good to hear that as well, because I think we hear a lot of negative or horror stories, and we don't hear enough positive stories. I think I know myself with a textbook baby. I've had 2 textbook newborn babies and very easygoing kids. I mean, I still go through the same struggles as every mum, but it just seems a lot easier because we haven't had any extra challenges on top. But in that comes guilt. You know, you don't feel you can share these stories with other mothers because this person's got it 10 times worse than, you know, you've got. So you should just be quiet and not, you know, say anything to anyone because, you know, really you've had it easy. So creating space, you know, and support with people who will hear you and hold space for you to talk about anything that's happening in your life or what's going on. I think my Google's just picked up what I'm talking about, which is pretty rude. I'm going to turn off my phone. But, you know, that's the next step in what I'm going to be discussing, which is finding your circle of support and being supported. So sometimes it's wonderful to have friends and, you know, people in the same situation. But I definitely found with the friendship that I made, it was one of the things that kept me surviving with my first baby, because I didn't know anyone. But she was a second-time mum. So then I went into comparing mode. She was a second-time mum. She was much more confident than me. She'd already been through this situation. She already knew what was normal and natural. And I found myself comparing my baby to her baby, who was like 4.5 months older than my baby. And if you've had a baby before, you know that even a few weeks can be so much more developmentally advanced than in those first days. Then, you know, every week your newborn baby goes through is like a completely different thing. It's like, well, you've woken up. Like, you can actually see now. And so I was comparing my baby because I wasn't around other women who had a baby the same age, and I didn't know what was going on. And then there was mother guilt, like comparing myself to other people. How does she look so good? You know, how did she get out the door this morning? And I had no idea what was going on in her life or how she felt about herself or what she was going through. And so the next step is finding that circle of support, having someone in your support circle who will listen to you and hold space and hear you and allow you to vent and allow you the space to say, oh my God, I only had like 4 hours sleep last night, and not go, which is what happens often. Oh, you're lucky you had 4 hours sleep. I only had 1 hour sleep. And that's where I take it to the next step with my programs, is by creating that safe space where the women in my program are really so thankful for the ladies who are in my program, is that they're so supportive of each other, and it's like a wonderful circle. Everyone's had a different birth. Of course, everyone has different births, even if you have a natural vaginal birth, or if you have a cesarean, everyone experiences something different because we're birthing with different people, we're having a different experience, a different body, a different baby, a different time. So we've all got something, that's, special to us that we're going through. And the thing is, we all have different support people around us. We have different challenges with our partner. We have different, support circles around us with our family and friends. Some of us have, really supportive people and people who are going through the same journey as us. Other people have no one, and they don't know. Very similar to me, I didn't have anyone. I felt a lot of isolation and loneliness in my postpartum, and I didn't know I was lonely at the time. I just knew I was hurting. I knew I had to be grateful. I had this wonderful baby, and I was so thankful, and I loved every minute of being with her. It was like amazing, but I was so lonely, and I was just sitting at home by myself. And so creating that circle of support is so important, to have that non-judgmental support, and to implement that, while you're trying to conceive or during your pregnancy. But if you've already had your baby, there is no late time, because this is a journey of life, right? It doesn't matter where you are in your journey. Even if you're a grandma watching this, there's things you can pick up on to become the person you want to. And then, your core values. Sometimes when we meet people in life, they make us feel a bit, when you meet someone and they make you feel like, oh, I don't feel comfortable around you. You do not make me feel good as a person. It doesn't matter why that is, but I would recommend, thinking about, some of the values or some of the things that are making you feel triggered, and whether you want to align yourself with someone like that, or if you'd rather align yourself with people now who I never knew existed. People who are so supportive, so loving, and so will sit there and listen to you, and give you all the time in the world and support you, even if they haven't been on the same journey as you. They can say, wow, that sounds really hard. That sounds really intense. Like, I'm feeling it right now for you. And, I'm here to support you. How amazing is that, to have people in your life who are like that? I mean, how valuable. It doesn't have to be a hard thing to create either. It's just starting off with one friend, contributing, and, having a laugh and taking the time out to create that one friendship, that you never know where it's going to go to.
So true. And thank you so much for chatting to us today, Ashley. I've really enjoyed listening to your knowledge and expertise. For anybody following along, you can find Ashley at the Motherhood Circle on Facebook, Instagram, and she's got a really great Facebook group as well. You'll find me in there.
Oh, actually, I closed that Facebook group down recently. Unfortunately, I did. But yes, you can catch me on Facebook or Instagram at the Motherhood Circle. And I've also got a free planner for your audience, postpartum plan, which will go deeper into some of the topics that we've talked about here, so that you can map out your postpartum if you're currently pregnant. And I'll give you the link, Danielle, so you can share that with your audience.
That sounds great.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I have really enjoyed it and love connecting with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashley. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.